Across alien landscapes, you stand alone. You are the sword that cuts through dangers unknown to the galaxy. You brave the expanses most would perish trying to cross. You are the last hope of a dying or dead species brought low by some great calamity. You are all that stands between civilization and the horrors that lurk in the winding caverns and derelict space stations. Metroid is a series that has become an integral part of who I am. I first heard about it from a friend of mine in middle school, but it wasn't until January 2016 that I decided to actually pick it up. I was browsing the eShop on my Wii U one day and saw a Metroid game that had just been ported. I thought, hey, this is that game my friend told me about, maybe I could give it a shot. So I downloaded the port for Metroid Zero Mission and did just that. That was the moment my journey with Metroid all began 10 years ago. Since then, I've become an avid Metroid fan. I've covered a bunch of the games here on my YouTube channel, from Super Metroid to the Prime series. I did a special event in the run-up to Metroid Dread where I speedran the 2D games and made fan art of each one. I even made an animatic of a scene from Metroid Fusion, which has since become the most viewed video on this channel. With Metroid's 40th anniversary coming very soon, I wanted to take a look back at the franchise and discuss my thoughts and feelings. I'll be talking about the games that I have played, which include most of the series minus Hunters, Federation Force, and Return of Samus. I have played other M, but I'm just gonna skip that game. Probably for the best I don't subject myself to that again. Jeez, I remember when I played that game and glazed it as hard as I did. Though, in my defense, I was like 15 at the time and had yet to develop the sensibilities and perspectives I have now. I'll also be making a tier list as we go through each of the games I've played, ranking them based on what I felt. So without further ado, here's a long, personal retrospective of Metroid. It's only appropriate that I begin with the game that started it all for me. Metroid Zero Mission was my Zero Mission just as much as it was Samus's. This game introduced me to Samus, the Metroid game loop, and the universe of Metroid as a whole. In my first playthrough, I barely had any idea what I was doing. How do I beat this larva thing? How the hell do I progress with the limited items I have? How do I get this thing off me? I tried playing the original Metroid that was included with this game, but I honestly found it frustrating. Getting resources back was tedious, every hit took a lot of energy, and it sent you so far back when you died. I could never beat the OG game. Zero Mission, however, was a much more beginner-friendly experience. For one, the Chozo statues provided me with the directions I needed to get each suit upgrade. Some might call this hand-holding, but to a day one player like me, it was my saving grace. It's convenient that you can replenish your energy and missiles with them, plus the save stations meant that I lost less progress whenever I died. The boss fights were pretty good, even if Mother Brain was a bullet hell. This was the boss that kicked my ass the most aside from the Chozo trial a little later. I replayed this game recently, and the bullet spam was what led to me dying once. Then again, it had been a few years since I played Zero Mission, or any of the 2D games for that matter, so your goat might just be washed. After the Mother Brain fight, you're stripped of all the stuff you spent hours collecting and left with a flimsy emergency pistol. Now, we have a brief but intense section where you're sneaking through the space pirate mothership to escape. I could never master this section, but that's entirely a skill issue on my part. Just when I think I'm doing well, I trip a laser by accident and have a bunch of pirates coming after me. It's a cool section, and perfect stealth is possible if you're locked in, though I guess I wish it just went on for a little longer. After you beat the Chozo trial though, the tone does a complete 180. You're no longer trapped here evading the space pirates. The space pirates are trapped here evading you. I got such a high tearing through the space pirates with my fully powered suit when I got it for the first time. I thought, and still to this day believe, the gravity suit is the coolest item in Samus's arsenal. A suit that lets you move through water and lava like it's not even there? Sign my ass up. However, I do feel like the unknown items you collect and activate are a bit underused in a casual playthrough. If you're doing a 100% playthrough, they see a little more use. On one of my later runs, the items that required those complex Shine Spark tricks were frustrating, but ultimately worth the struggle. I think Zero Mission has some of the coolest Shine Sparks in the series. Looking back, I feel Zero Mission has some great art direction. It has a very manga-esque style that I find visually appealing, despite not being a manga fan myself. I guess it makes sense, since the official mangas came out around the same time. The environments were so vibrant, and there was so much detail in every little thing. I still, to this day, love it. The soundtrack is also a pretty big highlight to me. Each one really sold the atmosphere it was trying to portray, from the upbeat, optimistic Brinstar theme to the eerie theme that plays when you're navigating Turian and fighting Mother Brain. Not to mention the Criteria remix that plays during the stealth section is pretty nice. In all, I couldn't have picked a better game to fall in love with this series on. Zero Mission will always have a special place in my heart for introducing me to the wonders of Metroid. You could beat this game in a single session if you wanted to, but honestly, I still love doing that every single time. That's why this game easily slides into high A tier for me. If this game acquainted me with the overall vibe of Metroid, this next game introduced me to the horrors of it. Metroid Fusion was the second Metroid game I picked up, not long after my first time beating Zero Mission. And oh boy, was I in for a ride with this one. Off the bat, I want to say that the story is among the best in the series. Here we are introduced to the X parasites, deadly organisms that spread like the plague and absorb DNA to mimic their hosts. At first glance, they appear to be just that, mindless parasites that are trying to increase their numbers. But that all changes the further we go. And not just because of that thing. Look, I know the SAX has some goofy AI, but this genuinely freaked me out on my first playthrough. That creepy-ass fourth wall break combined with an unnerving track that plays whenever it's near, along with its echoey footsteps, it would freak out anybody playing for the first time. Plus, it transforms into something straight out of The Thing when you fight it at the end. I felt like a badass when I beat the SAX without taking any damage on a more recent playthrough. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, the story. As we venture further into the BSL station, the X reveal themselves to be far, far more dangerous than the first 5 minutes of the game suggest. We learn that they are intelligent enough to sabotage your recovery, organically process data, actively hunt you using your weaknesses, and can even absorb the knowledge and memories of their hosts. These story beats were well executed and genuinely surprised me my first time. This is honestly peak writing that I feel we need more of. At first, the X are mostly confined to the main deck of the station, but quickly spread to others once Adam, the AI CO overseeing our mission, unlocks the doors for Samus to progress. Later on, we are forced to unlock more secure areas to progress our recovery, which only allows the X to spread further through the station. Your progression allows this terrifying disease to infect the station more, corrupting anything in its path with no hope of stopping it, with it only growing deadlier the further in you go. And the only reason you are even immune to this infection in the first place is because you have been infused with Metroid DNA, which just so happens to have been the sole predators of the X. And as we all know, Samus eradicated the Metroids in a previous game. Yeah, safe to say that came back to bite her in the ass. To make matters worse, the Federation starts to take an interest in the X, totally ignorant of the danger they pose to the universe. The soundtrack did a very good job at setting up a suspenseful, sometimes downright scary tone when it was needed. These moments shined when a new revelation was made about the X, an important story beat was happening, or when the SAX was lurking nearby, if not chasing you down. The environments of each sector you visit had a certain depth that I liked. Personally, they didn't really click with me as much as Zero Missions, but I still thought they were well crafted and effective despite the limitations of the GBA. I'm just gonna say that if one game definitely deserves a remaster, it's Fusion. If Mercury Steam makes a Fusion remake, I know for a fact that giving this game modern visuals and soundtrack are gonna make it pants-shittingly terrifying. Overall, I only had a couple small gripes with Fusion, the biggest of which is how linear it feels with Adam telling you where to go most of the time rather than letting you figure it out yourself. But none of it majorly detracted from my experience. The story has effective twists and turns, and it does well with the technology available at the time. Fusion planted the seeds for my ability to appreciate atmospheric horror, which I would experience more of in later games. I'm confident in putting Metroid Fusion in S tier. Mercury Steam, give us a Fusion remaster and my life is yours. I think everyone can agree that Super Metroid is the gold standard of Metroid. This is a big step up for me after playing the previous 2 games I've covered so far. There is zero hand-holding this time, leaving you to explore Zebes and figure out where to go next with no help whatsoever. This is where the proverbial tutorial ended for me. It made me realize this is the intended way to play Metroid: explore an alien world and figure it all out. Sure, there are map stations that reveal the layout of the area, but the game still makes you figure out how to get to the items you need to progress for yourself. Speaking of items, I feel like each one lived up to its potential here. This was one of my gripes with the previous games, where late game items felt underused on casual playthroughs, like the power bombs in Zero Mission or the screw attack in Fusion. In Super Metroid, every ability has plenty of use on a casual run. Of course, this is the first game that features things like the gravity suit, speed booster, and the charge beam. There's also some neat hidden abilities like charge beam combos and the crystal flash, neither of which I ever used. I glaze the art direction in Metroid a lot, but I feel like Super Metroid's is the best as far as the classic 2D games go. It's not a stretch to say that it's probably the most iconic in the entire franchise. This game's environments have so much more detail and atmosphere than the GBA games. Not that Zero Mission or Fusion lacked in that department, but I found myself loving the details in every little room. One thing I liked is how you can see Samus's visor glowing in darker rooms. There are also a few rooms where the environment gets darker and harder to see if you kill these little creatures. The point I'm trying to make is that Super Metroid is a masterclass when it comes to atmosphere. And of course, the soundtrack is the cherry on top of it all. It was this game that showed me why atmosphere and cool environments with fitting soundtracks are important in gaming. Obviously, there are themes like that of Lower Brinstar and Lower Norfair that are so iconic and beloved that they've been remixed over and over again in future games. But then there are themes like Meridia that have never, to my knowledge, gotten that same treatment. That was one of my favorite themes from Super Metroid, and it makes me kind of sad that it hasn't gotten remastered even once in future games. Another thing I loved about Super Metroid were the boss fights. They're the best and most unique in the 2D games. Mother Brains is iconic for so many reasons, but I'll get to that later. I did, however, like the mini-bosses such as Spore Spawn and Botwoon. Botwoon was neat to me because of its gimmick of going in and out of the little holes in the room. Dragon was also neat because of how there are different ways to kill it. I could never avoid getting grabbed, which meant I always had to use my grapple beam to electrocute it. Now, while we're still on the topic of bosses, I do want to talk a bit about the final stretch through Turian and subsequent battle with Mother Brain. The encounter with the heavily mutated baby Metroid was intense. The way you wander through this terrarium full of desiccated, lifeless corpses before you see it suddenly swoop in out of nowhere and ruthlessly drain another helpless creature of its life force. And then it goes for you, stopping only at the last possible microsecond when it recognizes Samus as its mother. It's here you realize that this gigantic Metroid was once the small, harmless little hatchling from the start of the game. As it flies away in shame, we're left wondering what the hell the space pirates did to make it this way. Moments later, we finally confront the resurrected Mother Brain. At first, it's exactly like the first time we fought her, but when we defeat her, everything is still and silent. No self-destruct sequence, no exit opening, nothing. And then, Mother Brain rises from the floor attached to a gigantic, grotesque cyborg body. The theme is this harsh, intense cacophony of dissonant organs that evoke a feeling of fear and powerlessness against the space pirate leader's true form. That feeling of hopelessness really comes in when she unleashes that devastating laser brain attack, which brings Samus to her knees, leaving us unable to do anything as Mother Brain continues her assault. And just when it seems like we're done for, the infant Metroid from moments before swoops in and absorbs Mother Brain's life force, reducing her to a lifeless husk before transferring all that energy to us. But not before Mother Brain somehow revives herself and turns her rage towards the baby. Now, still unable to move or do anything, we must sit and watch as Mother Brain's onslaught weakens the baby more and more, until it sacrifices itself in a last-ditch effort to save its mother. Its death grants us the very same ability Mother Brain used on us. Now, the tables have turned. Now, it's Samus who's absolutely beating Mother Brain's ass with the Hyper Beam. The only boss fight I can think of that evoked a similar feeling is Phase 3 of Enhanced Azuric from Doom the Dark Ages, right after the Slayer's Dragon sacrifices itself to protect him. Moral of the story, do not kill the protagonist's pet unless you want to be on the receiving end of a generational crash out. Super Metroid remains perhaps the best game in the series, and I totally understand why. There are so many iconic things about it, whether it's the soundtrack, design, or other things I didn't touch on for the sake of not yapping endlessly. This game showed me what Metroid is in its purest essence. It would be a crime not to put Super Metroid in S tier. This game showed me what Metroid should be. Samus Returns is one of the games I was sadly unable to replay in the making of this video. When I made my Let's Play series on it when it came out, I played it on my friend's 3DS that he let me borrow. Later, when I tried to play it for my Mega Metroid Marathon in the lead up to Dread, I downloaded the Citra emulator to play it. As we know, Nintendo wasn't very happy about Citra and has since been shut down, making it harder for me to replay this game. That being said, this section of the video will be me watching a long play or something, since that has better quality than my setup, if you can even call it that. This is the first Metroid game developed by Mercury Steam, and they did a good job setting the groundwork for later releases such as Dread. It was a pretty good remake of the original Metroid 2, which I have never played. Even then, I generally found myself having a good time playing. For one, exploration is much easier even if it's rather linear. Like, there isn't really any reason to go back to the other areas of SR-388 once you've exterminated all the Metroids there, unless you're wanting to do a 100% run. If you are doing a 100% run, collecting all the items in one area rewards you with one of a set of images that tell the story of the Chozo colonizing SR-388 before discovering Aeon Energy and the X-Parasites and creating the Metroids to counter the latter. This is where a lot of people learned that the Metroids were not a natural species, but a bioengineered weapon. Yes, the Metroids are dangerous, and the Space Pirates exploited their powers for their own gain and gave them a bad rep in doing so, but the Metroids were never evil. They were made to protect everyone from something objectively far worse. However, the Chozo lost control of their creations and were forced to seal them away with the help of a tribe of Chozo warriors who we'll learn more about in Dread. The final Chozo memory comes as a complete shock, because before then, the Metroids were sealed off, the X were brought to near extinction, and everything was under control. But then, we see all but one of those scientists and overseers dead, gunned down mercilessly by the hand of the warrior tribe's leader, leaving us to wonder who this madman is and why he just did what he did. I'll talk about that in a bit, but these final memories do an outstanding job laying the groundwork narratively for Metroid Dread 4 years later. The areas themselves are large and leave plenty of room for backtracking later on. There are teleportation devices scattered around to make backtracking quicker, whether it's in one area or all of SR-388. I wish these areas had more proper names instead of just Surface and Area 128. I like the look of each environment, though. Granted, there was only so much that could be done on the 3DS, but I thought Mercury Steam did a good job. I'm especially a fan of the Chozo Laboratory, also known as Area 7. Still, I wish there was a reason for us to go back to previous areas, such as for a suit upgrade. Speaking of upgrades, each one saw plenty of use, like in Super Metroid. You acquire your last one when there's just 2 areas left to clear out, so it leaves plenty of room for the late game items to see proper use. Plus, there are some new abilities, the melee counter and the 4 Aeon abilities. The melee counter lets you parry certain attacks by smacking an enemy with Samus's arm cannon and dazing them. A successful hit will automatically charge her beam, which allows for a smooth counterattack. The only real downside to this ability is the fact that using it kills any momentum you have. Dread would improve on this with the dash counter, but I think it's a great starting point for such a useful ability. It makes me wonder how it would look in a Metroid Prime game. The Aeon abilities were dope as hell, especially the lightning armor. That one was always my favorite visually, and that temporary invincibility was very helpful in tight situations, or when you had to fight the Queen Metroid, or just fusion mode in general. Each of the 4 abilities helped out in certain ways, like revealing the map and hidden blocks, increasing Samus's firepower, or just slowing down time. Like other item expansions, you can expand your Aeon gauge by collecting items scattered around. One more thing I do want to touch on with Samus Returns is the cutscene after the Queen Metroid fight. It adds a lot of depth to such an important and iconic moment in the series. I liked how Samus actually contemplated killing the baby Metroid per her orders before choosing to spare it. As we know, letting the baby Metroid live would save her life twice in the events to follow. It shows her more human side, and the common interpretation is that she saw herself in the now orphaned Metroid. Overall, Samus Returns was a much needed glimmer of hope for the series after the little dark age that followed Other M. There was a lot of exploration and some fun to be had, even if it was sort of a mini-boss simulator. I would say this game fits comfortably into high B tier, but as we know, Samus Returns walked so this next game could run. For people who have been around long enough, I made a review of Metroid Dread in early 2022 where I talked about my feelings regarding Dread's story, gameplay, and the Emmy. 4 years after making that video, my opinions on Dread have remained largely unchanged, especially after replaying it in 2026 with a fresh set of eyes. For those who haven't seen that video, I'll be giving a more compressed version of my review in this section. Off the bat, I want to say that the atmosphere of Dread is second to none as far as the modern 2.5D games are concerned. Modern technology and graphics are a wonderful thing, and I think it does Dread a massive service with how much the environments have. The amount of depth coupled with the small activities in the background makes ZDR feel much more alive than anything that came before it. Plus, the filters that are applied whenever you're in an enemy zone amp up the dread you feel in those areas on a first playthrough. Mercury Steam does a stellar job in making you feel isolated in Metroid Dread, making that sensation one of its best qualities. My only issue with the enemy zones in particular is how different some of them are from the area they are set up in. Their mechanical environments are fine in places like Cataris, Dyren, and Hanubia, but I think the rest of them could have incorporated more elements from the environment outside of them. By the way, how the hell were the enemy zones set up so fast? These places are pretty big, and it wasn't even that long before contact was lost with the robots. Maybe the zones were expanded after they were hacked, I don't know. Outside of the enemy zones, I really like the environment design as a whole. Some of my favorite places were Gavaran, Berenia or some of the rooms leading to it, and the blacked out sections of Dyren. I thought the latter was very cool artistically, and part of me wishes we had those sections for longer. Hell, it would have been really cool if the Emmy zone in Dyren was blacked out too. It would have made for a neat challenge, not to mention a scarier atmosphere. And of course, the music is peak. I've heard some people say Dread's OST was bad, but I honestly thought it was great. I guess its tracks aren't as iconic as the previous games, but that doesn't subtract from it in the slightest, at least to me. The eerie theme that plays when you're in an enemy zone is probably the absolute best part of those areas in general. That creepy sonar pinging noise really puts me on edge, even if I've played this game several times over. That is perhaps the best example this game has where the soundtrack sets the tone for the environment. As soon as you step into an enemy zone, that theme is the first thing you hear. It immediately reminds you that you are powerless against these things, and all you can do is evade the machine patrolling this place until you either escape or find its central unit. Speaking of the Emmy, I thought they were effective for the purpose they were given. Each one has a unique ability that keeps the threat of the Emmy fresh and challenging in its own right. Getting caught by one is practically a death sentence with how tight the timing to parry them is. Unless you have some super precise Ultra Instinct, it's practically a game over if one catches you. I wish we got the chance to actually evade the Emmy in Hanubia, because what little time we have with this one is pretty much just a cutscene. It makes me wonder what sort of challenge it might have posed with its Power Bomb ability. I won't talk about gameplay as much as I did in my review video, but one thing I loved is how mobile Samus is in this game. She's able to automatically vault over small objects, parrying won't kill any momentum you have, and nor will jumping while speed boosting. Also, the parry animations for some of the bosses are just straight up badass. My favorite ability was the Flash Shift, with how it allows you to teleport like a DBZ character. It's useful for reaching certain places or dodging enemy attacks, which is very important if you're playing Dread mode. The free DLC we got post-release is something I never expected for a Metroid game. Dread mode was quite the challenge for a casual like me, since your power suit is apparently made of wet tissue paper. One hit and it's game over. The boss rush challenges were also kinda neat. They gave Dread a little more replayability outside of the ending rewards and Chozo archives. Metroid Dread serves as the finale to the story arc that has been running for 35 years with the 2D games. The intro cutscene sums up the events of this arc neatly, so newer players are caught up to speed with the more important details regarding the Metroids, X, and Samus. There's also some pretty sick artwork in this and your later encounter with Quiet Robe. For the first time in Metroid, we actually see some live Chozo in the form of Ravenbeak and Quiet Robe. Ravenbeak is the villain of this game, and he basically wants to resurrect the Metroid species to rule the galaxy by having the Emmy extract the Metroid DNA from within Samus. He's also trying to get said DNA to fully awaken, which gives Samus the power to drain energy like a Metroid later on. Of course, this all backfires on him when the DNA does fully awaken and Samus goes full on Kratos on his ass. Ravenbeak's plan is alright, but there is one thing that kinda bugs me. During our chat with Quiet Robe, he was the only Thoha spared by Ravenbeak's genocide. If this tribe are the only ones capable of controlling the Metroids, why would you kill all but one of them? Personally, I think it would have made more sense to kill their leader, and then have everyone else but Quiet Robe die off in the ensuing X-pandemic on ZDR. Also, I feel there is more that could have been done with the final encounter with Ravenbeak X. I think if this were a full-fledged boss fight, it would have made for a more climactic final battle between the Metroids and X. In my review, I thought that nothing more can happen after the events of Dread. The X are eradicated once and for all, and Samus is the last Metroid in the universe. Looking back on that opinion, I think there could be a story worth pursuing post-Dread. It could involve Samus using her newfound powers for good, while someone like the Federation or some new villain tries to take it for their own means. So, while I was making this video, Metroid Ravenous got leaked, and it's set to release later this year. I'll talk about my feelings for it at the end of the video, but it's safe to say the point made by 2022 me falls completely flat. To wrap up this section of the video, I thought Dread was a phenomenal game. Samus Returns laid the groundwork for the franchise's comeback this decade, and Dread did not disappoint. Hell, this game outsold Metroid Prime 1 and was nominated for Game of the Year 2021, in addition to winning Best Action Adventure Game at the Game Awards that year. I think that says enough about how well received this game was, which is why it easily slides into S tier. Oh boy, am I excited to yap about the Metroid Prime games for the rest of this video. The Prime series is unique among Metroid for the shift from 2D side-scroller format to FPS, and off the cuff, the first game managed to establish itself as the gold standard. Among all the things Metroid Prime made me appreciate, it was the lore that I've come to love the most. I have become a massive lore whore as a result of these games, and I am not afraid to say it with my whole chest. And it's all thanks to this one item, the Scan Visor. It's a cool little item that you have right at the start that lets you scan anything from an enemy to some mundane object and learn stuff about it. It's useful for telling you how to combat the creatures you encounter on Talon 4. But the main thing to me is that it unlocks the ability to learn so much about the world around you. There are Chozo scriptures hidden around the world that tell you the story of what happened to Talon 4 and how the Chozo responded to the crisis that befell this beautiful world. About how a poison meteor fell from the heavens and wreaked havoc on this once pristine world with its spreading corruption. It's a tragedy what happened to this world, because what remains of the natural world and Chozo civilization here is just beautiful to explore. Yet the space pirates are here to tear it all down and exploit this poison for their own selfish gain. I'll yap about the visuals and environments in more detail in a bit, but Talon 4 is just gorgeous to look at, even the more industrial and scary parts of it. The world is peppered with other items to scan that tell you about how the Chozo and the space pirates respectively live and think. You don't even need to scan anything to get an idea of the black and white contrast between these two species and how they look at the world around them. Just look at the Chozo ruins and then compare it to something like the frigate Orpheon or the Phazon mines. Areas dominated by space pirates have nothing ornate, natural, or artistic. Everything is sterile and functional. If something doesn't have a purpose that benefits their goals, it is destroyed. Where the Chozo see Phazon as a great poison that corrupts all it touches, the space pirates see a bioweapon to further their agenda of galactic conquest. A YouTuber called Fat Brett made a couple of videos analyzing Metroid Prime's epistolary approach to storytelling. I talked about his Space Pirate video a little in my Let's Play of Metroid Prime Remastered. Both videos are really good and go into much more detail about the pirate logs and Chozo lore than I will in this video. I strongly recommend giving them a look. The point being, Metroid Prime opened my eyes regarding lore and world building. Each game in the series takes the same epistolary approach to detailing your surrounding environment and the story of it, rather than just feeding it to you through cutscenes. If Super Metroid taught me to explore the physical world without any help, Prime taught me to do the same in the narrative world. This approach of find the story yourself is what I especially love about the Prime games. Moving on from the story, the environments are just glorious in every sense of the word. There is so much life in every area, even in places where there is only death and corruption. I can't think of a time where I was so immersed in the environment of any video game I had played up until that point. I've honestly become a sucker for well-made environments with lore sprinkled in here and there. Two of my non-Metroid favorites include Ultra Kill and Helldivers 2. I think both games do fantastic jobs with their respective worlds and environments in their own ways. Ultra Kill's interpretations of each layer in Dante's Inferno is unique. Helldivers 2 has its own environmental strengths on each of the many biomes across the galaxy. The few moments of peace you get between dropping a 500 kg bomb on democracy's foes allow you to experience each planet for its own beauty or macabreness. Metroid Prime's areas taught me to really look into the visual details scattered around, not just the lore tidbits. They're immersive in a way the 2D games just can't match. This game was released in 2002 alongside Fusion, and Retro did a great job with the technology available at the time. So imagine how I felt when Metroid Prime Remastered was released and gave this classic a modernized look. The one thing that still vexes me to this day is how this was dropped out of nowhere. Like, Metroid Prime was the most beloved and best-selling game in the entire franchise until Dread overtook it commercially in 2021, and they released a remaster in the middle of a direct without any build-up? Mind you, I am not saying this as a diss, it's just baffling how such a well-done remastered was handed out so nonchalantly. Metroid Prime Remastered takes everything I've said about this game visually and gives it a modern polish that it massively benefits from. There are a lot more details that weren't there before, which add even more, like these leaves on the tree in the Chozo Ruins courtyard and the etchings in the stone. The lighting adds even more to the immersion, even if the mirrors sadly no longer work. One added detail I especially love is how Samus's arm cannon gets covered in ice when you charge the ice beam. I think that is, no pun intended, a super cool detail. The updated models everyone received add more to their designs, which make them feel a little more realistic. I think I've drilled it into your skulls at this point how Metroid's soundtrack is generally great across every game I've played, but I think Metroid Prime's is the best of the whole series. Each song in this game is perfect at setting the tone for whatever situation you're in, whether it's waltzing through the peaceful, rainy Talon overworld, fighting the space pirates or one of their Phazon-enhanced creations, or navigating the Phendrana drifts. There are so many good tracks that it makes it difficult to talk about all of them and what they made me feel. So to make sure I don't blather on endlessly, I'll just talk about a few tracks that really stand out to me. Firstly, the themes for the Phazon mines stick out to me. The first two levels of the area have this low, industrial-sounding ambiance. Unlike every other place on Talon 4, there is nothing lovely or alive about this theme, just an oral representation of the space pirates' cold, calculating modus operandi. It reminds you that they are a species who do not care for art or culture, and are solely focused on advancing their war machine, no matter how inhumane their methods of achieving it are. And when you reach the bottom level where Phazon mining actually takes place, the track becomes unnerving, almost alive. You remember that Phazon is an organic material that is dangerously radioactive upon hearing that Geiger counter. Yes, there is still plenty of space pirate machinery about the place, but this virulent substance is the dominant force here. The space pirates think they can control Phazon, but it is very much the opposite. And don't even get me started on the Impact Crater, the source of the spreading corruption on Talon 4. The lower Phazon mines were just the tip of the iceberg in every sense, and that is encapsulated perfectly here. The theme has a prominent organic feeling to it. It sounds like this is the theme song of the radioactive boil that exists solely to spread its poison across the planet. Not to mention the Metroid cries that are mixed in, alluding to the fact that the final boss is a Metroid that has become so twisted by Phazon that it is entirely unrecognizable as a Metroid. This is the so-called worm the Chozo Prophecy warned us about, and it's lying in wait for us in its corrupted hellhole. The last track I want to talk about is the Crashed Frigate theme, easily one of the most iconic tracks in Metroid Prime. It has this beautiful piano playing as you wander through the submerged wreck of the ship you explored in orbit at the start of the game. Yes, this is still technically a space pirate area, but nature was surprisingly quick to claim this once sterile place. That's basically the vibe I get when listening to this. It's a reclamation of life in a place where it was tightly controlled and horribly twisted. It says, despite everything, life will flourish once more. That can more or less be applied to Talon 4 after the Metroid Prime and space pirates are defeated. Once the disease has been eradicated, the beautiful flora and fauna of this world will return to its former glory. Briefly touching on the gameplay, one of my favorite things is how you're able to switch between beams rather than having their abilities stack on top of each other like in the 2D games. I think this makes for a cool change, and my favorites are the power and plasma beams. One thing I like that is carried on through the subsequent entries in the Prime series is how, after you acquire all your suit upgrades, the game forces you to search the world for the keys to the final area. The Chozo Temple not far from your gunship has 12 totems that each provide hints on the location of these artifacts that form the key to unlocking the impact crater and vanquishing the Phazon corruption once and for all. I think this is a great idea for two reasons. One, it pushes you towards exploring every little nook and cranny for these items, giving you the opportunity to explore Talent 4 even more. Two, it incentivizes you to look around for any other items you missed. You're going back through every area to find the 12 keys anyways, so you might as well search for any missile or energy expansions that you can find to get that coveted 100% collection rate. Okay, I've been glazing for 5 pages in this script, so I'll wrap it up here. In all, Metroid Prime is easily my favorite game in the whole series. It taught me how to appreciate so many things. The lore entries and tiny details add so much to everything, and I've come to love that throughout each of the games. The remastered edition did the environments a huge justice, and I love this game even more for it. That's why this game is going into S+ tier. Nothing competes with Peak. Now, this next game is going to receive pretty similar praise, as it is a worthy sequel. Echoes plays on the strengths of its predecessor to pretty good effect. The lore and atmosphere are once again my biggest selling points of this game, and there are a lot of people who say Echoes is the best Prime game because of that. Having been unable to replay Metroid Prime 2 for this video, I'll do my best to convey my thoughts on it based on my own experiences. The atmosphere has the most macabre, if not downright sinister, tone of any game in the series. For those who have never played Echoes before, the planet Aether has been split between two worlds, each existing in different realms. There is the regular Aether, which we land on, and a so-called Dark Aether. Where Aether is what remains of a lush, fertile world teeming with life, Dark Aether is a toxic, hostile, and terrifying world. This game revolves around Samus traveling between the two, using portals to ultimately destroy Dark Aether and the shadowy race that inhabits it. Because of Aether's situation, the dark counterparts of each area are pretty similar in layout, but not one-to-one. Some rooms or routes that exist in normal Aether are either very different or just straight up don't exist in Dark Aether. This means that you have to take a different route in Dark Aether than you would in the normal world. Hell, there are some parts of Aether that you can only access by traveling through Dark Aether for a bit. On top of that, Dark Aether's atmosphere is so dangerous that you take significant damage from so much as standing in it. Your only source of safety in this treacherous world are the light crystals left behind by the Luminoth, which slowly heal the damage you take while inside the safe zone they generate. Each area across both worlds is so well crafted that I'm honestly not sure if I like these more than Talent 4 in the first game. Then again, it has been years since I've played Echoes, so I can't give a concrete opinion without doing so. Regardless, they're all very well done. My favorite place would have to be the Sanctuary Fortress, though honestly Torvus Bog is a very close second. Each environmental puzzle was a challenge that I welcomed with every fiber of my being as I tried to figure out how to solve them. Granted, some were a bit tricky for a first-time player, but I respect a good challenge. I think my favorite part about the environments is how drastically the tone shifts when traveling to Dark Aether. Aether's environments still feel alive despite everything that's happened to it, but when you go to Dark Aether, it's a complete 180. Each room you go through feels sinister and hostile, for a lack of better words. This is where I think Echo's OST really shines, because the themes of Dark Aether are oppressive, twisted versions of their light counterparts. You can hear bits and pieces of the original theme, but they come out choked by the unrelenting darkness of the parallel world you're in. It's fitting, especially when you're being hunted by this dark world's inhabitants. My only thing with Echoes as far as visuals go are the graphics. To me, they always felt a little dusty compared to the first game. I wholeheartedly believe Echoes would be even scarier if it's given a remastered treatment like its predecessor. I just hope said remaster gets at least a little bit of marketing in the lead up to release. Moving on to the lore, I think it's some of the darkest in the entire series. Echoes focuses not on the Chozo, but another alien species we only ever learn of in this game, the Luminoth, a race of humanoid moth aliens who are on the brink of extinction. Before we even meet them, Samus arrives on Aether to investigate a squad of Federation Marines going missing after chasing some space pirates to the surface. Everybody is dead upon arrival, with some of the corpses suddenly being reanimated by some kind of parasitic creature. Worse still, we have a fleeting encounter with a being that looks like you. This is where we meet Dark Samus, our shadowy doppelganger who will be the catalyst of the events in the next game. Before we get to look for too long, we're attacked by terrifying creatures and barely escape with our life. It is upon meeting Umos, the leader of his species and only conscious member, that we learn what's going on. Dark Aether was born decades ago after a meteor collided with Aether. The object reacted with Aether's planetary energy and split the world between two dimensions. The creatures possessing the corpses of the troopers and the ones who just attacked us are known as the Ing, which we later learn translates to the Terror in their language. You can understand why they call them that upon seeing one in Dark Aether. A friend of mine said the warrior Ing looked like hands, and now I can't unsee it. The Luminoth fought a decades-long war of attrition against the Ing for Aether's planetary energy, for if one world gains total control of it, the other will cease to exist entirely. The Ing were merciless in their conquest, possessing everything from the planet's fauna to the Luminoth themselves, turning them into twisted beings called Darklings, which we now have to fight. Things took a turn for the worse when the Ing stole a device that was capable of collecting planetary energy so it could be transferred between worlds. With it, the world was brought to the brink of destruction, and it most likely would have fallen, if not for Samus being in the right place at exactly the right time. A YouTuber called Begast made a video discussing the lore of Aether and the Luminoth in much more detail. I'll link the video in the description for you to go check out, because it's a really good one that highlights just how grim things are for the Luminoth by the time you arrive on Aether. In any case, you are now the Luminoth's Deus Ex Machina, and it is your sole duty to save what remains of the Luminoth and their world from destruction at the hands of the Ing. The Space Pirates have also established a new Phazon mining operation on Aether after the loss of their facility on Talon 4, but they take a secondary role next to the Ing and Dark Samus. Along the way, we encounter the latter a couple of times as she tears through Space Pirates and anyone who tries to deny her Phazon. I liked how each encounter with Dark Samus has a different gimmick each time. It keeps each encounter fresh while some aspects of the previous fights remain, something that we will see a little bit more of in Metroid Prime 4 with Sylux, but I am getting ahead of myself there. The third and final fight after defeating the Emperor Ing was just an adrenaline rush in every sense of the word. Having this final battle take place while Dark Aether is collapsing really ramps up the stakes both in the moment and narratively. Just like the Metroid Prime's core last time, you have to use Dark Samus's Phazon energy against her to win, which makes sense since Dark Samus literally is the Metroid Prime from the last game, having taken the form of Samus as shown in the ending cutscene. Dark Samus aside, I thought the bosses were pretty cool. I particularly liked how some required you to make use of the environment around you to damage them rather than just damaging them directly with your weapons. My favorite has always been Quadraxis, personally. I like the challenge it posed with there being no safe zones unlike with the other Temple Guardians. On that topic, I liked how those bosses evolved and presented a new challenge with each phase. I think I like these bosses more than those in the first game. Not that I disliked any boss from that game, especially not Meta Ridley, but I enjoyed the bosses of Echoes much more. They're significantly more challenging, but I personally didn't mind this difficulty tweak. I don't have much to say about gameplay other than a gripe that a lot of other players have. The ammo. In Prime 2, we have the dark and light beams. Both weapons are handy in their own right, whether it's opening portals or vaporizing the Ing. Unlike the default power beam, however, these beams require ammo to be used. At first glance, that's a neat feature. However, getting ammo to refuel each beam is tedious because you have to kill something with the opposite beam to get the ammo you want, and it's not guaranteed said ammo will drop, even if you're smashing objects in the hopes of getting it. The power beam can be used, but it's a lot less effective against stronger foes, which slows things down significantly. The Annihilator beam you get after beating Quadraxis uses ammo from both pools, but grants both kinds upon killing something with it. Still, it would have made using these weapons more stress-free if ammo was dropped more frequently. Just like the previous game, access to the final boss is barred by a set of keys. Fortunately, one of the keys has already been found, leaving us to find the remaining 9 using hints provided by the final testaments of the Luminoth warriors sent to find them. The light suit we get for this phase helps a lot with exploring areas in Dark Aether that we just couldn't reach before. Not to mention, it's got a cool-ass design. In addition to the hints, we get a little bit more insight into how the war was fought between the Luminoth and the Ing. At the end of the day, Echoes was a challenging but intricate and fun experience. Its demanding gameplay, while sometimes frustrating, made for a worthy trial. Its atmosphere is so well done, and I would love to replay it so I can experience the utter dread of Dark Aether again with a fresh mind. The story's ending feels rewarding as the Luminoth get a happy ending they never thought would come until Samus arrived. Their long war with the Ing is over. Dark Aether has been destroyed, and what few remain can rebuild, all thanks to the warrior who came from the stars and asked for nothing in return. Echoes fits comfortably in high A tier for me. Now, with how good the first two games were, let's see how the third made me feel. Metroid Prime 3 had quite a lot going for it. The last time I remember playing this game was in 2023, just before I moved out into my apartment, so it's still somewhat fresh in my mind. Corruption did a lot of things that are honestly pretty cool. For starters, this is the first game we get with full-on voice acting for pretty much everyone other than Samus, from the other bounty hunters to the side characters. It makes things feel more alive and active, especially in the beginning when we're aboard a Federation warship and then fighting alongside the other hunters on Norian. It makes having to fight them later hard, even if we spent literally 5 minutes with them, especially Rundus, dude. Like, come on, it's unfair we get a character like him and then have to put him out of his misery an hour later. His boss theme only makes it harder. Justice for my homie. Another big thing I liked is how Prime 3 takes place on a multitude of worlds rather than just one. Granted, the transition cutscenes are longer than ideal, and travel is rather linear with AU-242 always telling you where to go, but I loved it regardless. Because we travel between multiple worlds, we're treated to different environments and stories for each one. Skytown Elysia was well and away my favorite place in the whole game. I'm a huge fan of its steampunk aesthetic in contrast to the more advanced technology of Norian and the pirate homeworld. The music couldn't be a more perfect encapsulation of Chozo research outpost floating above the clouds with its heavenly theme. Getting to use the grapple lasso to zipline across some areas while shooting stuff is honestly one of my favorite experiences with this game. Brio's tribalistic design and soundtrack are frankly a close second. Sure, the pirate homeworld and Phase are cool, but we just haven't gotten anything with an identical vibe since Brio. I really want to see another world like this someday in future games, whether it's Prime or 2D. And I can't forget about the GFS Valhalla. Holy shit, that place is scary. I don't think anything else in the whole series has given me chills like the Valhalla did, and that's putting it above my first time playing Fusion. It's funny it has that name because this does not feel majestic or grand like the Norse Valhalla, more like straight up terrifying and right out of a horror film. The scary ass red glow of the nebula that parts of the hull have been ripped open to, the frozen bodies of people in their final moment of life, and the fact the ambience gets more unsettling once you reach the ship's bowels, all of it combines into the single most unnerving experience I can remember playing Metroid. It's hard to believe how much this resembles Dead Space, despite the fact that game literally came out the next year. The GFS Valhalla is easily the scariest place in the whole series. Okay, pulling myself out of the depths of hell, I think Corruption has some very unique gameplay that does really well in certain places. Of course, there's the Hyper Mode, where you can sacrifice an energy tank to enter a state of invincibility that you can just abuse the corrupted state and stretch it out like a shower beer, but that's not what I want to talk about. The Wii's motion controls gave Corruption a lot of cool opportunities for interactions that make it feel like a VR game. Using the grapple lasso to tear away debris or an enemy's armor was a really cool feature, as it made me feel like I was really doing that with my own arm. There's more interactions like this throughout the game that require physical actions, like twisting, pushing, and pulling. However, as cool as that is, it does feel clunky at times. Sometimes the movements just don't register correctly, and you have to do whatever you just did over again until it works. Most of the time, this was fine. One of my favorite moments with the motion controls was when we got to use our arm cannon as a blowtorch to repair our electronics. The idea of Samus being able to use her arm cannon as a tool is a neat and somewhat funny idea. Overall, it was really cool how we got to do this. Using Samus's gunship as more than just a save point is also neat, but there's so much more that could have been done. Throughout the game, we have to upgrade the gunship so it can help us progress. These upgrades come in the form of ship missiles and a ship grapple beam. However, the ship's grapple beam is only ever used for hauling the massive components needed for the nuke we're making on Elysia. Outside of that, it's only necessary for a single item expansion on Brio. The ship missiles are only really used for blowing up the disabled anti-air guns on Brio or walls. I think it would have been so much cooler if we had certain encounters, or even a boss fight where we can command our gunship to carry out a strafing run in the middle of combat. Not only would it be cool as fuck, but it would also allow this ability to shine the way it deserves to. Also, the bosses were probably the best of the whole trilogy. Even the mini-bosses felt cinematic and engaging to fight. Each one was progressively better than the last, even though AU-313 wasn't as good as the Dark Samus fight just before it. In all, I feel every single one made excellent use of this game's controls. Each boss was unique and posed its own challenges that had me locked in the whole time. Meta Ridley's fight was really cool, and I liked the intensity of having to beat him in less time before you die than in the end of Echoes as he plunged down the reactor shaft. By the way, how and why did the Federation dig a hole that is 6.5 kilometers deep? One more thing Prime 3 did that I enjoyed were the missions where you had to protect the Spire from space pirates on Elysia and protecting demo troopers during the assaults on the pirate homeworld. Both of these encounters had me on my toes and keenly tuned to my surroundings the whole way through. Every time the Spire took a hit or a demo trooper died, I'd have this moment of panic as I tried to find out where the offending enemy was before any more damage was done. Of course, Hyper Mode makes dealing with these threats easier, but the stakes still kept me on high alert. I know I haven't said as much about the story and lore yet, and I'll keep this part relatively short just because of how much there is between each of the three major worlds. The Space Pirate logs mainly serve to bridge the gap between Prime 2 and 3, so I don't have much to say there other than the idea of a pirate cult worshipping Dark Samus and Phazon is whack. Corruption's story ultimately reveals the source of all Phazon, including the meteors that hit Talon 4 and Aether to be a living planet in the far reaches of space. Again, alluding to Dead Space before it even came out. The Elysians and their Chozo creators were actually discovered this world more than 1,000 years prior, but it wasn't until they studied it further around the time Corruption took place that they discovered the truth of Phase. In summary, Phase is sending meteors through wormholes in an effort to reproduce by corrupting any world these meteors hit until they are just like it. The lore you can find on each world ties everything together to explain the source of this galactic scourge you've dealt with for the past 2 games. Admittedly, the Brio lore was the weakest link if that was the goal. Not that I thought it was bad, but Brio didn't do anything to tie in the way the others did. The Skytown lore was honestly pretty sad, because the Elysians just wanted to fulfill their creator's wishes, only to discover a cosmic horror and be wiped out literally days before Samus arrived. Now, the stakes in the actual story of Corruption feel personal, because Samus and the other hunters are attacked by Dark Samus and have Phazon embedded in each of them. She wakes up later than the others to find out that they've all gone missing and we have to finish their jobs. But, while on Brio, we learn the Corruption initially thought to be benign can overload Samus with Phazon energy and potentially drive her insane. This is later revealed to be the fate of the other hunters who lost their minds and became Dark Samus's puppets. With the fate of the galaxy at stake, we have to continue fighting the pirates and destroying the meteors that hit the 3 worlds while the Phazon corruption within Samus grows more and more. In the end, Dark Samus is vanquished and all Phazon in the universe is eradicated. I loved how the personal tension ramps up progressively with the Corruption as well as having to fight the other hunters throughout the journey. It makes you feel like there's a real personal element in all of this as you struggle to not succumb to the fate of your comrades. In the end, Corruption was a wicked finale to the Metroid Prime trilogy. The mechanics were cool, even if awkward at times, the environments and soundtracks were great, and the action was so good. One of my biggest issues remains with how much potential was missed with using our gunship for combat as I talked about earlier. I don't know, maybe a future game will give us this potential. Either way, this game goes into A tier for me. Originally, I was gonna make a full-fledged video discussing my feelings about Metroid Prime 4. However, I never got around to making it because I was preoccupied with my final semester of university. So I figured I'd instead talk about it here. Metroid Prime 4 wasn't all bad in my opinion. Yes, there are things we could have done without, especially the tedious, boring green energy grind at the end. The story was tensionless, there were no puzzles the Prime games are known for, and the NPCs could have been better. I hate to say it, but there's a lot missing here. All that being said, however, Beyond still has things that are worthy of praise. Off the bat, I want to say the opening cutscene is absolute fucking cinema. No matter how many times I watch it, and no matter this game's flaws, I get so hyped up watching it. It is well and away one of the best cutscenes in this series, and it's not even close in my opinion. It's just so cool seeing Samus smoke the pirates with their gunship, and it makes me wish we had action like this in Corruption. The opening section on Tanmar as a whole was pretty cool. Beyond's art direction is one of its best qualities. I thought Prime Remastered was a tech demo as far as graphics go, and that belief turned out to be right in a way. Viros has several places that were just astonishing to look at. The Fury Green feels like a more overgrown version of the Talon overworld, minus the rainstorm. The view of the bridge leading to the Lamorne Temple and the views of the enormous memory tree honestly made me stop for a moment to appreciate the sights. I love the environment design of Fury Green, even if its level design was pretty linear. Personally, I think Prime 4's linear level design is fine in places like Vault Forge or Great Mines, given what they're going for. Still, some variability in the paths you have to take would have been nice, especially in the more wild areas such as Fury Green. Sure, the Soul Valley has some dungeons here and there, but I think we can all agree this game would have been so much better without it. The Ice Belt's opening area where you fight the wolves just made my jaw drop when I saw it for the first time. It is an amazing view, and it makes me wish we had more opportunities to look at the mountain range from different angles rather than just being confined to the frozen Lamorne laboratory for the most part. From a visual perspective, this area was my favorite apart from the Vault Forge. I know I've made my bias towards industrial sci-fi areas apparent by now, but I loved this place so much. The racetrack in Tower 3 felt out of place for a Metroid game, even if it's just a tutorial for using Viola. Apart from that, I loved the concept of an alien motorcycle factory powered by an endless thunderstorm. Driving through the tunnels between the towers with the storm raging outside was a cool experience visually. It makes me wish the Viola tutorial took place outdoors rather than inside. I think that alone would elevate this area further as my favorite. Shifting from the environment's art direction, I really like the design of Samus's Viola suit. The red, purple, and black color palette was really freaking cool, and I liked how it was reminiscent of Prime 2's light suit. The Legacy suit is also a cool design, but not as much as the Viola suit. Plus, that suit's ability could have been something so much more useful than what we got. And the soundtrack. Holy crap, the soundtrack is good. The Vault Forge's theme sticks out to me in particular because of its industrial space metal vibe with the guitar, piano, and choir. It's my favorite song in this game by a long shot. It is just so good to listen to. The thing I like the most about Fury Green's theme is the Phendrana Drifts motif. It's a nice little treat for veterans like me that kinda takes you back. Overall, I liked how alien the soundtrack was for Beyond. I think it did pretty good. The story of the Lamorne left a lot to be desired, but I found it interesting how their downfall was self-inflicted. With the exception of the Brionians and corruption, every civilization we explore was brought down by an external calamity. But here, the Lamorne learned the hard way why playing God is often a bad idea. You could almost liken them to the space pirates with how much they try to bend things they don't understand to their will. Obviously, the Lamorne's intentions were more benevolent than the pirates. The overall story pretty much lost all tension after the opening on Tanamar. However, I can see what it was going for with the underlying themes of grief and loss between the Lamorne, Samus, and Sylux respectively. The Lamorne who were twisted by the great tragedy are called Grievers, and personally I find that a bit confusing because the Lamorne who weren't turned were the ones grieving the loss of their own despite their best efforts to reverse the transformation. Then of course there's Sylux grieving the loss of his squad, even if he brought that on himself and chose to blame others for his choices. Now, is there more that could have been done to explore these themes? Yes, but I will give points to how it tries to convey them. Gameplay-wise, Prime 4 was alright. I just wish the devs did more with the psychic abilities Samus was given rather than just slapping the psychic label on every upgrade and calling it a day. The control beam was cool though, I liked using that to aimbot enemies in some encounters. I feel like this ability had plenty of use throughout the game, unlike the Psychic Bombs. One thing I think would have been cool is that if the Psychic Glove could be used to direct an enemy's attacks back at them. Like, there could have been something like a psychically enhanced space pirate that could only be harmed by its own attacks, similar to the Berserker in Corruption. On that note, I wish there was more enemy variety than just different versions of the Cybots, Crawl Tanks, and Grievers. The space pirates were caught in the burst of light that got us here. Where the hell did they go? Plus, they could have added some of the tension this story was missing, such as them trying to use green energy for their own purposes and trying to get it back to Tanamar or wherever. I didn't really mind Viola, personally. I thought it was a cool concept, but it should have had more uses outside the Soul Valley. Combat could have also been much better with it. The Fenris fight's first phase was neat, but there's more that could have been done with that. Overall, Samus with a motorbike is a cool-ass concept, but there's a lot to be desired in execution. The free aim mechanic feels out of place for a Nintendo Switch game. This sort of thing was fine in Corruption, but it didn't feel right for this console. The elemental beam weapons were fine in my opinion. I didn't have to worry about resource management as much as I did in Echo since they all shared one ammo pool. I did like how freezing enemies midair with the ice shot causes them to fall and take damage upon impact. That was a neat mechanic, and it really helped with some of those annoying Cybot encounters. I also thought the boss fights were pretty cool. My favorites were easily the second and third encounters with Sylux, at least the second phase of the latter, as well as Zelios and Carvex. Some of the boss fights like Keratos could have incorporated more of your abilities, such as ripping open armor with your grapple lasso, but I thought they were alright. The only boss that didn't really do it for me was Varmus, mostly because of the issues I talked about with Viola combat. Now, this might be a hot take to some of you, but I honestly didn't think the Federation companions were that bad. Some people like them, others despise them. Personally, I'm somewhere in the middle. Yeah, they were a far cry from compelling and had crummy dialogue, but I just couldn't bring myself to hate them. Not even Mackenzie, who I'm pretty sure caught more smoke than anyone. I guess I could tolerate them, for a lack of better words, even if Mackenzie's constant green energy reminders were annoying. Though, if I can be perfectly transparent here, I low-key saw some of myself in Mackenzie. Not one-to-one, of course, but his less annoying traits reminded me of me. Speaking of, the escort missions were alright, but we could have done without them in the Great Mines and the first phase of the final boss. I think the Great Mines would have been even scarier and more tense if we were totally isolated from our team upon entry. Plus, if the space pirates were actually present on Viros, a final raid pushing through the Chrono Tower with the team, similar to the raid in Prime 3, could have built up to the final battle with Sylux better. One character I did take somewhat of an interest in was Tokabi. His devotion to Solon intrigued me because it's the first time I can recall where an actual higher power was worshipped, where the civilizations we've encountered were more spiritual and focused on concepts instead. It made me wonder what other deities exist in Metroid that humans worship. The way Solon was described kind of made me think of Artemis from Greek mythology, and it led to me asking if he was a standalone god or if he was a part of pantheon of other gods that represent other aspects of life. As for Armstrong, as a self-professed Metroid fanatic, I can't really blame her for her excitement. I mean, if I were in her position, I would be geeking out too. Granted, as an active duty soldier, I would have had more restraint. Now, if there's one character in Beyond that I am willing to fight tooth and nail over, it's Sylux. I think Sylux was done dirty because of how minimal of a role he has in Beyond. In the beginning, he was raiding Tanimar with his army of space pirates he took control of through his Metroids. His goal was to obtain more Federation tech to make himself more powerful, but after we got sent to Viros, his motives are just kind of unexplained. Why did he reactivate the green energy cannon in Flare Pool? Why was he in the healing pod the whole time? That aside, the 100% ending cutscene answered some questions people had about him for 20 years. It showed us what kind of person he is and explained the origin of his hatred for Samus and the Federation. I've heard one theory suggesting Sylux disagreed with the Federation's reliance on bounty hunters like Samus. If that is true, it would add another layer to his character. I think Sylux still has a lot of potential to be a memorable villain if the writers of Prime 5 could just give him a more active role. From what little we do get of him in Beyond, he strikes me as a real anti-Samus. What I mean is that Sylux strikes me as a character foil of Samus rather than just another doppelganger. Where Samus is noble, selfless, and often calm, Sylux is arrogant, selfish, and spiteful towards his foes. Quick side note, Sylux's voice actor nailed it. He did such a great job encapsulating Sylux's venom towards his enemies with what little time he was given. Now, to demonstrate my thoughts, I'm gonna put Samus and Sylux side by side on the screen real quick. Their power suits are kind of similar, but diverge in a few key aspects. For one, Samus has a warmer color palette where Sylux's is cooler. Samus's pauldrons are round, using shape language to show that she is the hero. Meanwhile, Sylux has pointy, triangular pauldrons that signify he's the villain. Another big thing that I believe justifies Sylux as an anti-Samus is how both of them reacted to the same situation. Both Samus and Sylux had a Metroid hatch in front of them, even if Sylux broke into a lab and forcibly hatched it. As we know, Sylux stole that Metroid and experimented with it until he created the means by which to take control of the space pirates. Samus could have used the baby Metroid from SR388 for her own purposes too, but she didn't. Instead, she gave it to researchers who tried to harness its power for the good of civilization, a decision that would end up saving her life down the road with the events of Metroid Fusion. Okay, I think you get the picture by now. Psylocke is a cool villain in my opinion, and he's a great antithesis of Samus's character. I really, really hope he gets more time to properly shine in Prime 5, because I am fiending for more screen time with this generational hater. To wrap up my overall thoughts on Prime 4, I thought it was alright, but there's a lot to be desired in the important areas. The story could have been so much better, but at least it gave us loose ends to potentially explore in the next game. Beyond was a bumpy start to this new Prime trilogy we're getting, but with what it did well, I'm cautiously optimistic for the future. My biggest hope for Prime 5 is that it'll be a return to form. I feel like low B tier is a fair place to put Metroid Prime 4. It had its flaws, but I still got something out of it. And there you have it. I think that about wraps up the biggest and most personal video I've made in quite a while. I got the idea to make this when I realized Metroid is turning 40 this year. With how much of an influence this series has had on me, I felt like this would be an appropriate way to honor it on such an occasion. I'm honestly not sure what my channel would look like, nor where I would even be if I hadn't fallen for this series after picking up Zero Mission on that fateful day in January 2016. Outside of my YouTube channel, Metroid inspired a lot of my artwork and writing, so I decided to draw Samus not only to honor the 40th anniversary, but to serve as the thumbnail of this video. No AI was used here, just human skill and a dedication to a franchise that really changed the way I think. Through the series, I've come to appreciate different aspects of gaming, whether it's environment, atmosphere, or storytelling. Even though Metroid has gone through its ups and downs through the years, I still love it to pieces for how it taught me to appreciate so many things. And with the recent leak of a so-called Metroid Ravenous coming down the pipeline later this year, I'm hopeful for whatever it brings to the table. My biggest point of curiosity is what this new story arc will involve. What new overarching threat awaits us? I really hope we'll get to use Samus's Metroid powers from the end of Dread in some capacity. Mercury's Steam has yet to disappoint, so I'm pretty eager for Samus's next adventure despite the subpar reception of Prime 4. Whatever the future holds, I'll be waiting for it with an open mind and a heart full of love for Metroid. For our fair warrior, Samus Aran. Thank you for watching the video if you've made it this far. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed hearing me yap about my feelings for Metroid. As always, I will see you guys in the next video. Maybe even the next mission.